Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads, and welcome to my weekend books. I think this might be the first weekend books that's actually on a Monday this time. Anywho, I'm trying to get my shit together. I should have done this before. So I only really started and finished 2 books this week, but I finished a third that I started earlier in the month, and I'll let you know how that goes. To start with, I ended last week on a high note with When in Rome by Sarah Adams, so I started the second book in that series, Practice Makes Perfect, and I absolutely adored this. This was my first 5-star book. I just really connected with it. I loved that how the small town put Annie in a box and they don't want to see her out of it, and this whole practice that she's doing is to get out of that box. If you don't remember what this is about, I don't have my glasses with me, but I'll give it a shot. Annie Walker is on a quest to find her perfect match, someone who complements her happy, quiet life running the local flower shop in Rome, Kentucky. But finding her dream man may be harder than Annie imagined. Everyone knows everyone in her hometown, and the dating prospects are getting fewer by the day. After she overhears her latest date say she is so unbelievably boring, Annie starts to think that the problem might be her. Is it too late to become flirtatious and fun like the leading ladies in her favorite romance movies? Maybe she only needs a little practice. And Annie has the perfect person in mind to be her tutor, Will Griffin. Actually, that's not accurate. It is not Annie who has that in mind. It's someone else who does. I hate it when they're... I know they gotta make the back of the book sound more exciting, but anywho. Will, the sexy, tattooed, and absolutely gorgeous bodyguard, is temporarily back in Rome, providing security for Amelia Rose as excitement builds for her upcoming marriage to Noah Walker, Annie's brother. He has one personal objective while on the job: stay away from Annie Walker and any other possible attachments to this sleepy town. But no sooner than he gets settled, Will finds himself tasked with helping Annie find the lover of her life by becoming the next leading lady of Rome, Kentucky. Will wants no part in changing the sweet and lovely Annie. That's right, he likes her just how she is, which is important. He knows for a fact that some stuffy, straight-laced guy won't make her happy, but he doesn't have the heart to say no. Anywho, there's a little bit more, but I loved this book. I loved the humor in it. I loved Annie trying to climb out of the box that they've put her in. Even her sisters. I'm losing my words. I'm just glancing through. Oh, I did want to say this. This also has a very realistic glimpse of military life for regular Americans. So Will was prior service. He was in the Air Force on active duty for 6 years as a security forces specialist. I entered the military for all the wrong reasons. It had never been my dream, but when I needed a path to take quickly, it was there. And it's there for a lot of people. The military has gotten a lot of people out of situations that they didn't want to be in. Bad homes, small towns. I don't regret my time in the military, but it just never quite felt right for me. There wasn't a lot of happiness in it for me. And I loved this because in modern times, which is better than Vietnam, people tend to glorify the military and everyone in it is a hero, when actually they're just regular people like you and I. And you've got shitty soldiers, and you've got great soldiers, and you've got great leaders, and you have poor leaders. And you have people in between. So, you know, for some, all the military is a tool to get from one place to another. And that's fine. Anywho, off my rant about that. I still loved Practice Makes Perfect. That's one of the reasons. If you need a light, fun romance with very little spice. In fact, the sex scenes in here are kind of like fade to black, which I appreciated. I usually skim through the more detailed graphic scenes, not because I don't like it or I'm a prude or anything, but just I read all that when I was younger, and now I'm like, okay, let me get to, I like the romance. Anywho, speaking of romance, I'm not sure what made me pick up this next book, but the next book I started and finished was Swimming in the Dark by Thomas Jedrowski. This is actually led me to my first read of February, which I will start, actually started the 31st, but whatever. Set in early 80s Poland against the violent decline of communism, a tender and passionate story of first love between two young men who eventually find themselves on opposite sides of the political divide. Okay. When university student Ludwig meets Janusz at summer agricultural camp, he is fascinated yet wary of this handsome, carefree stranger. But a chance meeting by the river soon becomes an exhilarating and all-consuming affair. The pair spend a few dreamlike weeks together in the countryside, inhabiting a beautiful natural world removed from society and its constraints. But in their repressive communist and Catholic society, the passion they share is utterly unthinkable. Once they return to Warsaw, Janusz quickly rises in the political ranks of the party and is awarded a coveted government position. Is he? I don't remember. Ludwig is drawn toward impulsive acts of protest, unable to ignore the stark economic disparity around them. Their secret love and personal and political differences slowly begin to tear them apart as both men struggle to survive in a regime on the brink of collapse. Okay. Let me start with, I gave this 2.5 stars, rounded up because I was being kind on Goodreads. I did finish it, which is probably another reason I rounded up. And the writing style was good enough that I didn't want a DNF like I did with some other books earlier this month. But what was bothering me about the writing story is he's writing this as a letter from Ludwig to Janusz. And it's, everything is you did this, and that's what bothering me. So it's a letter to Janusz, telling Janusz their history. And if I was Janusz, I'd be like, I already fucking know this. So that bothered me. I mean, that's what he chose to do. Also, I didn't feel anything between them. In Practice Makes Perfect, I felt something between them, but early on in this book, there's an encounter between Ludwig and a man in the park, and I felt there was more connection between those two than between Ludwig and Janusz. Like, I don't think Janusz really loved Ludwig. That's how I came away feeling. The other negative is that I felt the anti-communism parts were like parts of something he read in a book. And I'm going to make another example here. Like, these are the things I should say about communism. But again, I didn't feel anything. Whereas in Prophet Song, where it is anti-totalitarianism and fascism, I felt that. I didn't feel like Paul Lynch was grabbing something from the anti-communism playbook and reverberating? Spewing it out to me. But that's what this felt. Like something he read in a book but not experienced. Now, I don't know that Paul Lynch has ever experienced fascism, but he could write about it, and I expected more for this. It was just, like I said, out of somebody's playbook, this is what I'm supposed to think about communism. And there's one other thing in here, where he's talking about his mother's death in 2 different places. And it is the same scene twice. And that threw me out of the book so much. I had to go back and look to make sure I wasn't rereading something I'd already read. The words were almost identical. Anywho. Swimming in the Dark. It's fine. I'm not a gay man, so take my criticism, or take anybody's criticism with a grain of salt. So maybe someone else will get more out of this. I just didn't feel it. So, after that, I considered reading the third, Sarah Adams, but I don't like to binge writers back to back to back because I get burnt out. So, also, it was really close to the end of the month. So I found my first book, Svetlana Alexievich's The Unwomanly Face of War, and I sat down for the last few nights of January and finished this one. This was very good. It's just nonfiction and it's oral histories, so it was a bit of a slower read. I loved this perspective, though. I do not remember off the top of my head how many stars I gave it. I think it was 4. I loved hearing this from the women's point of view. These are Soviet women, primarily Ukrainian, who fought on the front lines, on the home front, and in the occupied territories. These women, more than 1 million in total, were nurses and doctors, pilots, tank drivers, machine gunners, and snipers. They battled alongside men, and yet, after the victory, their sacrifices were forgotten. God damn it. Alexievich traveled thousands of miles and visited more than 100 towns to record these women's stories. Together, this symphony of voices reveals a different aspect of the war, the everyday details of combat life left out of official histories. Anywho, one thing I found in this was similarities between this and another book, which I thought was in arm's reach, but it's not, Home Before Morning, which is a story about a nurse who returned to America after Vietnam. I want to speak it all out. Finally, someone wants to hear us. For many years, we've said nothing. Even at home, we said nothing. For decades. The first year, when I came back for the war, I talked and talked. Nobody listened, so I shut up. And that is one of the more powerful passages to me in this book. I highly recommend it. I do wish that I could have listened to this. I realize that here the war hasn't ended and never will. That's Svetlana's perspective on a house that she goes to visit. Again, like I said, I wish that I could have listened to this, and I could have. I just chose to read it. But I'm so glad that I did read it. And I highly recommend it if you're interested in World War II or the women's perspective from especially the Soviet. I also wish I would have gotten more Stalingrad survivors, but maybe there weren't that many. Okay, so that's it. Really just 3 books, really 2 books that I started and finished this week, 3 that I, in total, but it's not a race. I've got a goal of 100 books this year set on Goodreads. Actually, I told you a story. I don't have it up because I've got something else up. I did listen to 2 short stories in one collection, The Shawl, and it is about World War II. I listened to that as a part of the remembrance for the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz, the liberation of Auschwitz. I don't know why I can't pronounce today. Anywho. So, on audio, I'd hope to finish this in January, but I still have 11 hours and 14 minutes left on Bolivar by Arana. This is interesting. I know that I'm missing probably some details because sometimes I zone out when I'm driving and then I realize I didn't hear anything. But what I will say is, it has given me an interesting perspective on a history of a part of a world that I had not had any knowledge on. So, Bolivar freed 6 countries from Spanish rule and is still the most revered figure in South America today. This is kind of funny because I'm listening to this, and the other day I read an article about someone from the U.S. who's Hispanic in culture, but I think her family comes from either Mexico or South America. I'm not sure. But she moves to Spain to live with her husband, and they hate everything about it. Like, they don't understand that the culture is... Why is the culture Hispanic culture not the same as the culture that I come from. Completely different country, completely different people. So anyway, I thought that was funny, and this makes me think of that article that I read even more. She was like, my people are warm and friendly. These Spaniards are standoffish and cold. Anyway, that's an aside. Anyway, so I don't know if I'm going to get that finished this weekend. I'm recording this on Saturday, and it's already almost 12:30, and I have not done any chores yet. But I haven't listened to this except for about 20 minutes in the car. So I'm definitely going to try to get it finished by next week, though, and try to at least tomorrow get some good listening in while I'm doing chores. Next up for me, the book Giovanni's Room plays a large part in Swimming in the Dark. In fact, Janusz one time says to Ludwig, stop comparing us to Giovanni's Room. So that is what I'm going to read next. I have actually already started it. I started it last night, Friday night. And I'm going to bring Prophet Song back in here first. I already like it much better than Swimming in the Dark. It's James Baldwin. His writing is fantastic. But when I was reading the introduction, that's all I had planned to read last night, but I got about 18 pages in. Kevin Young, who, anyway, I'm not going down that rabbit hole, wrote the introduction, and he writes in here about Baldwin, a lesson that he learned sooner than some. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read, he wrote. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive, who had ever been alive. I was the man. I suffered. I was there. And it made me wonder, and it could very well be, is that going to be my theme of the year? My unintentioned theme? When I talked about Prophet Song, when I did my review on Prophet Song earlier last month, I talked about a book that I had listened to called The Romanovs, and at the time when I was listening to it, I thought, it's always been the end of the world. And then in Prophet Song, he says, the world is ending over and over again in one place but not another. And then I read this that Baldwin said about it's happening everywhere all the time. Or, yeah. The things that tormented me connected me with all the people who are alive who had ever been alive. So it's happening all the time. It's always the end of the world. Anywho, that's just from the introduction. I got farther than that. I got to page 26. Whew. Anywho, I look forward to reading Giovanni's Room. I did not intend it and pick this intending to kick off Black History Month with it. I was thinking at the time, it was like January 11th, and so I was finishing this and I was like, I need to read Giovanni's Room to see if it's better than this. So then I picked it up and I was like, well, what am I going to do for February? And then I was like, it's Black History Month. So on Tuesdays moving forward, I'm going, for each Tuesday this month, I will do a video showcasing Black authors. Not necessarily Black American authors, but Black authors. Tomorrow I'm going to choose books from the Booker long and short lists through the year. I actually did a book haul because of that. So, and that's what I feature. And then I'm not sure what I'll feature the next Tuesday. It may or may not have a theme. It'll just be books I like, that I have, or that I have and want to read. Anyhow, after Bolivar, I'm going to take at least a week break from audiobooks and may pick up mid-February. I'm not sure. On the nonfiction side, I will be reading The Coming of the Third Reich by Richard J. Evans. I actually started this early too. Again, intended to read just the preface, but then I went ahead and got a head start because the book is not as long as it seems. This is where the notes start, but it's still a little chunky, and I've got to read at least 17 pages a day, and I haven't read any today, to get where I need to be and finish it by the end of the month, and February is a short month. That is it for me. Overall, it was a good reading week, even though I only read 3 books. Swimming in the Dark took a couple of days. Svetlana took a couple of days to finish. And then I started Giovanni's Room last night, Friday, last day of the month. And honestly, I probably could have finished it, but on Fridays I'm fried, brain-wise. So I ended up watching a movie. Anywho, I'd love to hear if you've read any of these books, what you think about them. Please let me know down in the comments. I love to hear from you. Again, tomorrow I'll be back with a Black History Month video, and then on Wednesday I will have my January reading recap. And that is it for me. As always, thank you for sticking with me on my journey. Happy reading.